At this time, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Senator Ron Johnson. Senator Johnson, would you come up? Huge round of applause for Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Richard. Happy to be here. It's a pretty somber mood right now on Capitol Hill. If you haven't heard, we've had a political assassination. Charlie Kirk, speaking to a group of young people at a university, got shot in the neck and was died. I am here out of respect for the political violence that occurred on September 11th. I'm here because, as ranking member of the Permanent Subcommittee of Investigations, our chairman held a hearing on the Live Golf, their agreement or their attempted agreement with the PGA. I personally didn't agree with that investigation, but part of that investigation was a pretty high-profile hearing. That prior to that hearing, we had family members of 9/11 come up to me and request me to use that moment to try and extract the information from the FBI in terms of what they knew, what the FBI knew about Saudi involvement. Again, I'm from Wisconsin. Obviously, I remember where I was in 9/11. We all will never forget that, but personally was not impacted like the firefighters and the family members. So this is really, certainly as a public official, this is my first contact and really serious thought process going into really what impacted. I mean, as much as I was impacted by the iconic pictures of the firefighters walking into danger. And quite honestly, as Chairman of Homeland Security, I just saw a video of the hearing we held at the 9/11 Museum in New York City back in, I can't remember what year it was, but it was when I was chairman of the committee. And that obviously had an impact on me, but not to the extent that having the families come up and realizing that our government hasn't been forthcoming. I didn't realize that. So we asked for those records on a bipartisan basis. Of course, we haven't gotten it. Haven't gotten to this day. That inquiry led to being contacted. First of all, I've got a pretty good friend in Oshkosh. He's a contractor, knows a lot about engineering, structural engineering, knows Richard. Started sending me what I'd call the best of James Corbett report. I watched the different documentaries, Calling Out Bravo 7, Building 7, the last interview with Graham McQueen. And like so many other things, whether it's, my investigations into COVID and COVID injection and, COVID injection injuries, childhood vaccine injuries, once your eyes are opened, you can't close them. The problem we have in America today is so many of our institutions are no longer trustworthy. The American people, for legitimate reasons, do not trust so much of our institutions, and government is really kind of the leader in that lack of trust. I believe that the family members, the firefighters, the people definitely impacted, have a right to know at least what our government knows. Now, I also have to be very, very realistic. I mean, I come from a manufacturing background. I know how to solve a problem. One thing you have to do is you have to set yourself achievable goals. So I've spoken to enough people in this movement. I think I know what you want, okay? You want the full truth. I'm not sure that'll ever come out. Now, let's face it, when President Trump promised to release, for example, all the files on JFK assassination. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I probably won't find much new. There've been a lot of people interested in that, really dug deep, found witnesses, a lot of witnesses died. We find that somewhat of a pattern. But I thought after, 60 some years, what are the chances that the incriminating stuff wouldn't already have been destroyed? I've got the same problem with the Epstein files. Okay, no, 9/11 happened a long time ago. Met with a group, including Richard, earlier today. I've given a couple interviews on, James Corbett. There'll be one coming out tomorrow with Brett Weinstein. And a legitimate point I'm making, because I know a lot of people have theories. Okay, I don't. Again, some might be crazy. I don't dismiss them. Okay, because so much information has been withheld, because so many legitimate questions not only haven't been answered, but anybody who even asks them is vilified for it. Okay. One of the reasons that I think it may be difficult to get to the very truth is if you really think about, well, what are the theories? What could have, if it wasn't Al Qaeda solely, if there were people that helped him, okay? If that were known, what does that do to our world? I mean, we all, I think we're all old enough here. We all saw 9/11. We all remember that moment. You probably uttered the exact same thing that about 2 billion people uttered that day, is this changes everything. The full truth may do that as well. So again, I don't know whether the full truth can ever be possibly revealed. I'm not saying I would do anything to cover it up, but I am saying I would understand, based on some of the theories, why even responsible government officials might say, I'm not sure this is something we should release. I'm just giving you the resistance. I'm trying to make sure you understand what the reality situation is here. Okay? Now, from my standpoint, what I suggested, because I know there's been a lot of suggestions about having President Trump appoint another 9/11 commission. And as I've heard that, the structure of that would be, don't have politicians involved, and I don't disagree with that at all. I do know President Trump has an awful lot on his plate. I do know, and I think you need to be realistic about this, is, those who want the truth. I mean, there's certainly people on the fringe. There are a lot of people that write some, put their theories out there, not particularly acceptable, easily marginalized. Okay? So I understand. I think Kurt understands. I mean, why, politically, this is a, this is a controversial thing to delve into. Okay? I generally have not been particularly fearful of delving into things that aren't particularly politically popular. So again, that doesn't deter me. But I understand where maybe President Trump wouldn't want to appoint another 9/11 commission. Quite honestly, I don't think it's necessary. Because I think you, within your group, and when I was on James Corbett, he said, what are you going to talk about? Well, I said, they'll probably be as dissatisfied with my speech as this interview is going to be dissatisfied. I don't have the information. Now, I don't really have the investigatory capability. I've been trying to extract information from the federal government for years. The deep state doesn't give up its secrets very easily. So I'm very realistic about that. So, what I've seen out of just ordinary citizens, the amount of information, the legitimate questions that have been raised are, pretty impressive. Okay? So I don't dismiss, and I acknowledge that there are so many questions that absolutely deserve to be asked without the people asking them being vilified or marginalized or termed crazy. So what I've suggested to the group today is you've got the experts. Figure out how to cooperate. Richard provided me, before I started going to some of these shows, once I opened my mouth on this subject, to give me the questions. Again, I've watched the documentaries, but it's kind of all scattershot. Bring it together. Lay out the list of questions, and he did. It was very helpful. But what I would suggest this group do is figure out how you cooperate. Form your own version of a 9/11 commission. Right? Won't have the government funding. There may be some people that Kurt know that could kind of help provide some staff on this thing. But gather all the information, organize it well, wrap it up in a bow. And again, I can't make any guarantees, but if it's done well, and I would say only include irrefutable information, nothing conjecture, nothing that can be attacked. I think you have enough to create a report that I would then be willing to use. And I have a responsibility, by the way, in terms of how I use a U.S. Senate committee platform. I have a real responsibility, not just to the families and the firefighters of 9/11. It's the families of the COVID injection injured, the families of the vaccine injured. Now, I realize how I've been vilified in the media, how I've been, again, what they do is that person's been discredited. Once you've been labeled discredited, you're not a very effective voice. So quite honestly, I don't want any of you to be discredited. I don't want to be discredited. I have a responsibility to make sure I'm not discredited. So again, this is a very sincere suggestion. Bring yourselves together, do it in an organized fashion, lay this out so the American people can look at this, and maybe in the end that's as an achievable goal as you can get here. I don't know, maybe you'll go beyond that. We won't know it. This is one step at a time. But what you're noticing, you're gathered here in the year 2025. We're talking about things, you've got a U.S. Senator here in front of you. This hasn't happened, right? Well, why is this happening this year? Well, it's because people like Tucker Carlson, because Kurt Weldon has come out and started talking about these things. Okay, the window, the aperture is being opened up. You can't expect everything to be revealed tomorrow. This may take some time again, and we may never know the full truth. But I think at a minimum, the families of 9/11, the firefighters, the people who've lost loved ones, the people who have been working to dig up this information, these legitimate questions, at a minimum, ought to be given the respect to ask them without being ridiculed, without being vilified, without being marginalized, and as much as possible, get those questions answered. So again, it's maybe not particularly satisfying hearing from me in terms of kind of what my involvement in this thing would be, but that's my suggestion. I think that's the best way to move forward. And this literally is going to be step by step by step, but give yourselves credit. Give the people like Richard and the others, the Corbetts, all the people, Kurt Weldon, give them credit for creating this opportunity. Okay? And that's really about all I have to say. I'm sure you were maybe looking for more. That's kind of what I can offer. Okay? Kurt, did you have a question?
Kurt, can you come up and use the mic?
No, I'll speak from here.
Oh, there it is.
And you'll hear from me tomorrow. And I just want to say, this is the first senator who's had the gut to come out publicly for what you all know. You understand that? This senator called me at my home on Easter Sunday. Called me at my home on Easter Sunday and said, I want to talk to you. And I went down and met with him, and I took people with me, including Judge Sullivan. And he listened, but he just didn't listen. You need to understand that with a person like this, you need to work carefully. You need to help him because he's under tremendous pressure. The opposition are not going to let him do anything that they think will give him an advantage politically or his party politically. And this is not a political issue. The president's in a tough spot, but this man has been willing to stand up and speak out, and he's an elected official. So what I'm saying to you, regardless of anything else, you need to go back to the people that you represent, especially those in Wisconsin. You need to proclaim that this man is a hero to all of those people that we honor tomorrow. Those 343 firefighters, those 2,977 responders and civilians, those 2,500 soldiers from the U.S. that were sent to Afghanistan to look for bin Laden when he was in Iran, and they killed him in body bags. This man is willing to speak out. That's not easy. Senator, I want to applaud you. Tomorrow, Congressman Kucinich and Rohrabacher are joining you here with us because they now have decided it's got to be bipartisan. We're going to build momentum, Ron, and it's because of you. Thank you.
So I can't state this strongly enough. This is not about me at all. That the only reason I'm concerned about not being marginalized is for the people that are counting on me to be able to uncover and expose the truth and have the reputation that when I expose the truth, it'll be accepted as truth and not immediately marginalized. And so that includes this group, but it includes the people I'm advocating for on all the other subjects I'm trying to do. So again, don't worry about, this is not, I could care less about the political ramifications of this. I care deeply about the people who deserve the truth and they're not getting it from our federal government, and I'm trying to get it for them. So anyway, God bless all of you and enjoy your.
Time for a question? I do. Do we have any questions? Raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question of the senator. We'll start with Madhava.
You said something on the James Corbett report, which I think is very important. I think he interviewed you about 8 or 9 days ago. And you said you're not ready to champion it, but you will platform it. And I think that is an enormous move because that's all the truth needs. We just need a platform. It's going to fly on its own. And I thank you for that.
But again, let me underscore, I have a responsibility to that platform as well. Okay? I take that responsibility very seriously. Sir.
Lost of our troops in Afghanistan. And I want to recognize Pat Tillman as a special victim of assassination. I think on the day after Charlie Kirk is assassinated, we've got to acknowledge that it's the assassins that are in charge for the most part. I'm sorry.
So,
Not.
you know, and I think it was in the Corbett interview that I did start talking and kind of broaden this on a macro basis. You know, would have we had 9/11, had America heeded George Washington's warning? Now, you know, listen, you know, America, and again, America's a great country because Americans are good people. I mean, the fact that we send our sons and daughters across the world, not to gain territory, as Colin Powell said, you know, the only land we ask for is to bury our dead, but literally to help others gain their freedom, to have what we have. I mean, that's extraordinary what we do for people, as a people. So I don't want to denigrate those efforts, but I think we have to question, you know, how often we put our nose into things that we probably shouldn't. And maybe we put our, you know, after being the world leader, after World War II, kind of thrust into that position. Did we embrace it? Did people like Alan Dulles and the CIA, and did we embrace it to such extent that we got so involved in things that blew back on us? Okay? I think, again, those are legitimate questions to ask. I mean, we should go through these 4 entanglements and go, okay, why did we do it? What was the goal? What was the cost in human life, ours and theirs, and human treasure? I mean, if we would do that, if just going back to Vietnam and go through that, I don't think we'd be very happy with the results at all. But it's, again, it's not to at all denigrate the finest among us and the service and sacrifice they've had, but you have to have a sober postmortem of all of these things. And I think that's one of the things I think as we go through this, whatever we do with 9/11, at a minimum, I hope we really do go, what, so again, not to blame us for it, but to understand what our actions, what our foreign entanglements have resulted in. And I think that's just, that would be a healthy thing for us to do, which we generally don't do. Listen, I love America. I think we are the greatest nation in the history of mankind. We're not perfect. Yeah, we always ought to strive to be perfect. So again, sir.
Pat Santi from New Jersey. Do you see under the current administration the aperture, the window that you described as the opportune moment, but mentioned the evidence has to be not circumstantial?
Well, again, I think if you lay out the evidence in a highly organized fashion where it's indisputable, irrefutable, bulletproof, does this president have the aperture? He's quite the specimen. I mean, I've never seen a president engaged in more things early on in his administration. So, I mean, we'll see. You know, right now he's a busy guy. Okay, I wouldn't be able to do what he did or what he does. So, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Kathy Boylan. I'm with the Catholic Worker, and I've been, 9/11 truth person for a long time. But one of the things that I'd like you to do is read David Ray Griffin, a theologian who wrote 14 books on 9/11 and was convinced it was a false flag operation. And then I go to the Pentagon every Monday to ask the soldiers to put their guns down and refuse to kill. And as the Air Force people go by, I always say to them, do you wonder why the planes weren't scrambled on 9/11? The planes that flew from Boston, why weren't they stopped? And it turns out that Rumsfeld had taken control of scrambling the planes 3 months before 9/11. And he was out in the yard picking up debris on 9/11 at the Pentagon. Rather than being in and listening, he was supposed to be calling on NORAD and the Air Force to scramble the planes. And then there was Commander Worley at Andrews Air Force Base, who gave an interview to the Washington Post on 9/11 saying, my men were ready to go, but they had to wait. We had to wait for an order. The order never came because it was coming from Rumsfeld, who wasn't giving the order to scramble the planes. Commander Worley, he was promoted that day. A few years later, do you remember the big terrible crash of the Metro at Fort Totten? Do you remember that? 9 people died. Anyway, Colonel Worley and his wife died in that fiery crash. And my opinion was he was killed because he would have, if there was another commission, he would have told that, he would have had to tell the story because people already knew that he had said, I was waiting for an order that never came. Thank you.
So again, here's an example of a lot of questions, just a small subset of the questions that needs to be organized and collated and put together, like I say, with a nice ribbon behind it. And that's what you got to do. Okay. So, okay, one more.
Thank you so much for being here, Senator Ron Johnson. You just mentioned how the aperture is opened. Obviously, you're here. Kurt Weldon's here. He held hearings, I think, all the way back in 2005, 2006 on Able Danger. It is the 24th anniversary. What do we have to do between now and the 25th anniversary to try to get some accountability in that executive? Because you just mentioned going all the way back to Vietnam. I would argue we haven't had any type of executive punishment since the days of Iran-Contra. And even that was a lot of slaps on the wrist and pardons after the fact.
So again, you use the word punishment. I know a lot of people want that. I use the word accountability. And from my standpoint, the first step and quite honestly, the biggest step in accountability on a political realm is exposure. Okay. So that's exposure, expose it, allow the American people to see the truth. And that's what I'm saying. I think the best thing we can do is what I've suggested here, gather together. You got a lot of people that are way more expert, have, looked into, questions like the lady just talked about. I mean, I don't know these things. Again, I think James Corbett was totally blown away by the fact when I said, really until I started delving into this, I had never heard of Building 7. The vast majority of Americans haven't. So again, people are seeing this, people are asking questions, people obviously, more people are understanding that you can't trust the government because you saw how much they lied to us during COVID. But again, is it all going to be revealed tomorrow? No. I mean, this is a step-by-step process. Be realistic about it, and do a really good job here. That's the best way to do it. But you've got other speakers, so let me. I've disrupted this enough. So God bless all of you. Okay, take care.